This is Castle 1. Race officer speaking.
Lane line is on boundary up ahead, 35 seconds out.
A bit lower and faster here.
That's a good one, Jimmy.
Still gaining on the lane line there.
We're looking at 10-5 and 42. Matching him on the boundary, yeah. Copy.
Welcome back, podcast listeners. It's great to have you back for part 2 of our chat with my old Team GB teammate, Paul Goodison. And as every other month, if you haven't already listened to part 1, maybe spin back and give that a listen first. You'll hear Paul's fascinating story of his bid to win Olympic gold and how he fell in love with sailing all over again as he discovered the joy of the foiling moth. In this part, we're going to pick things up post-London 2012. Goody has already talked to us about his 3 Moth World titles, but at around that time he started moth sailing, Paul also made a move into the world of the America's Cup. His Team GB teammate Ian Percy was running Swedish Cup team Artemis Racing for the 34th Cup in San Francisco and asked Goody if he fancied a role in the team. Before all of that though, if you're enjoying listening to the podcasts, then please do help keep us going with a quick visit to buymeacoffee.com/sailing podcast. It's dead easy. And your support is really appreciated. It helps keep us ad-free and to keep on delivering these uninterrupted interviews. If you've already shown your support for the podcast, then many thanks. If not, give it a go. It's super simple. Right, let's get going as Goody starts to carve out a career in the world of the America's Cup. I hope you enjoy the time I spent with Paul Goodison.
And I had a call from Terry asking if I wanted to come and do a week's moth sailing with him. None of us really knew what on earth we were letting ourselves in for. Day 2, day 3, we were out in 15, 18 knots and the thing just kept accelerating. We were like, wow.
Right, let's talk America's Cup. I mean, you ended up for the 2017 Cup campaigning in Bermuda with Swedish team Artemis Racing, run by Ian Percy, of course. Tell us, Paul, how that all came about.
I remember being just before the 34th Cup in San Francisco and chatting to Ian and basically saying I wanted to get involved. And I think it was Adam May that came along with Nathan to look after all his stuff while he was at the Worlds in Hailing Island, and I'm not sure if he was there scouting as well. So I think word got back to Ian that I'd done all right and maybe I had some potential there, and it was through more chats with Ian I got invited to do that. I'd also been talking with Ben and couldn't quite decide which way to go, and Ian did a good job of persuading me to go and hang out in San Francisco rather than Portsmouth.
How did he do that? How did he win? And I guess what was your role going to be at Artemis? What was on offer?
Originally, the offer was to be the second driver, and at that point, I think Prada was still going, and Francesco was all lined up to be there. As time progressed, things changed, and my best opportunity was to slide away from the driving into the wing trimming, which was disappointing for me because I maybe felt like I didn't get a big enough shot at what I wanted to do. But it was also my best opportunity to add to the team and to try and get us in the best position to win. And it also excited me learning a new role and the technical side of things. And it was great to work alongside Gooby and learn the ropes of the wings and all the technical side of that. And I guess I just wanted to add to the team. I was desperate to be involved in a winning team.
It was pretty special in Bermuda. I mean, there was a lot going on, wasn't there? Artemis had 2 boats. Oracle was there. Team Japan were out there. And then eventually Ben Ainsley's British team. What was the feeling from inside a team going into that Bermuda Cup?
I think there's a lot of confidence. Like, we obviously had a very fast boat when the breeze was up, and we had great confidence in that boat. But with the America's Cup, so much happens in the last 3 or 4 months. It's almost like the first 2 years are almost irrelevant. It's how you how you change things and how you adapt from what you learn in the last 3 or 4 months that makes the difference. And we made some big changes, but obviously couldn't make the big enough changes to compete against the impressive Kiwi team that was a little bit of a step of ahead in those lighter conditions. I think had the regatta been a bit breezy, we had got a better shot, but unfortunately they were just another level from everybody else in the lighter stuff.
It's crazy though, isn't it? As you say, that the pace of change is incredible, particularly in those last few months. Almost day by day, teams are getting so much better.
It's I guess what's the strangest part is you think that the learning curve's going to plateau because you've been sailing these boats for 18 months, but you go from making small incremental gains to these massive gains that come from, I guess, just being in the heat of battle and learning very quick because you can finally go up against other boats properly.
It seemed there was a lot going on in sailing at that time. It felt like a real period of progression. The wings, the foils, as we said, huge leaps in race speeds. What were you learning at that time in Bermuda? And what did that cup, looking back, what did that teach you as a sailor?
I think my biggest lessons looking back at the Artemis experiences, I went in there as an individual laser sailor or moss sailor who was pretty good at managing themselves and the small team around them, being a coach, a physio, a physiologist, and surrounding yourself by 4 or 5 really close, tight knit group, and then all of a sudden you're opened up to a team of 100, and that is so strange for me initially, just not almost knowing where to turn and where to look because there's so much information being thrown at you left, right, and centre, and you. I think the biggest learning was the understanding that the things that you see are the most important maybe aren't the most important on the wider scale, because unless you have a good, really balanced understanding of what's the best in foil world, what's the best in sail world, what's the best in engineering and weight and making compromise in all of those areas to get the best package. It's not just about having the best boat to sail. And for me, that was a really good learning opportunity. And I just look back at that thing. I soaked up so much knowledge, being surrounded by so many intelligent, amazing designers, and again some impressive sailors with Ian, Nathan, and the group we had there. It was I kind of felt like a sponge, just soaking it all up and really enjoying the time I had there.
I remember seeing you at the base. I mean, we were very welcome at Artemis. We used to visit a lot to film, and actually thinking how hard that could have been for you. I mean, you're very much used to being master of your own destiny, and there you were, as you say, you weren't on the A boat, and it requires, I guess, as you're describing, a different kind of mindset to get the most out of that, to realize you're not racing on the team, but there's a massive opportunity here.
Yeah, and that didn't happen straight away. Don't get me wrong, didn't have that attitude maybe for the first 12 months where I wanted to be the guy on the boat. I wanted to be adding from my sailing side and being out there, and it was tough. It wasn't easy playing second fiddle, but it comes a point where you are part of a team and you want to win, and you have to figure out in your own mind how you apply yourself as good as you can to make the team win. And through figuring that out, it gave me a new lease of life. From not being so excited about going to work to sit on the chase boat and watch the other guys sail, all of a sudden you pick up the straws and you realize you can add in this department or help here, and it becomes so much more self-fulfilling when you realize you're adding and you're making the team go better. And I think again that was another key point and just a mind shift for me from realizing that you can add a lot to the team in other ways, and it's not just about the sailing. And don't get me wrong, it was frustrating. I wanted to be on the boat every second I could, but to be able to be adding made me feel a lot better when I went home at the end of the day and feel a lot more self-fulfilled.
There's a good lesson there for sure. Goody, we'll digress from the Cup slightly, because it wasn't too long after Bermuda that you jumped into a keelboat. I mean, I think I'm right in saying 2017, the Star Sailors League in the Bahamas. I was there commentating. I remember it well. And it was another regatta packed with massive names. Why were you suddenly in that, sailing the Star? And how did you approach it?
It was a real funny story. We were in guard at the time and just down at the local sailing club, which I'm a member of here in Torbalo, and Robert Scheit's a member there as well. He was out there sailing every day, still in his laser, and I couldn't quite believe why. And he came in one day and he said, "I have just a job for you." And I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "You need to go sailing with Frithjof, the German star crew." And I was like, "Why?" He's like, "Oh, you'll have so much fun." And he basically talked me into it. And that evening I met Frida in the Winds Bar, the local bar. And I hadn't realized, but Robert had just told Frithjof that he wasn't going to sail with him. He wanted to sail with his normal Brazilian crew. So Frithjof needed somebody to sail with, and Robert had quite aptly pushed me into that, which I guess looking back I should be quite thankful for, because we didn't do too much training, but we had a couple of weekends just on the lake, and then going to the Bahamas to race all these star legends was super fun. And I was so lucky that Frida basically sorted the boat out, and I just pretty much had to get in and steer, and we did all right in the end, which was good.
Robert Scheidt, if you're listening, big mistake. You won the regatta, of course. I mean, it was such fun to watch. It's a great format, isn't it? I mean, I can remember at the time how pleased you looked. I mean, you were absolutely delighted to win. What did that mean to you? And tell us a little bit about the event.
The event is really special. Like to have a bunch of sailors that you don't usually get the opportunity to race against, a lot of legends, a lot of people that you've looked up to throughout your career, and finally you're basically on a big holiday with them in the Bahamas, with a serious side of the racing tagged along with it. And I remember, I think it was day 2 or 3, we basically, on the start, we had an incident. I think it was a French, and we'd put a small hole in the front of the boat and sailed the next 2 or 3 races basically filling up with water, and couldn't quite figure out why we were going slower and slower. And we came in and craned the boat out, and Frida was less than pleased with me having put a hole in his boat. So I got in a bit of trouble there, but luckily redeemed myself at the end. But the racing is super fun, and the knockout format at the end means that every race there's quite a bit of pressure on going into the obviously the last race on the last day, with only 4 of you on the start line.
It was great fun to watch. Talk to me about that win. What do you think made the difference? I mean, how come you beat all those star legends?
I think I was a bit younger than them.
No.
There was plenty of young guys there as well. I think the difference was the downwinds. I think the Star ends up being quite similar to the Laser, with picking the small chop and getting the surfs and being quite physical, rolling the boat around. And we worked quite well as a team to move the boat around in those waves, and we were fast downwind, and that's basically what made the difference and helped us along.
Oh, well, it was great to watch. So, Paul, post Bermuda, back to the Cup. You're winning in the Moth class, and American Magic come calling. The New York Yacht Club entering the 36th America's Cup. How did that come about?
It was interesting. I had a call from Terry asking if I wanted to come and do a week's moth sailing with him. And I was like, it's strange he wants me to come and coach him moth sailing. But I was like, he obviously alluded that there was probably more to it behind the scenes than just a week's moth sailing. And we went and spent 8 days in Miami. I didn't do too much sailing with him. Terry, bless him, spent a bit of swimming. It was probably the windiest, waviest week ever in Miami. So it was not easy. But it was great to spend time with Terry, to spend time with James, the coach, and a bunch of other guys that were there. And I think it was really just a test of how we got along as a group, and if we would be able to work together. And I really enjoyed those times. It was nice after the sailing to go and socialize, but also to do more structured debriefs and see how analytical people are and how they work about problems and discuss things. And it was something that really excited me.
That was some team you had. Was Terry Hutchinson, of course, leading his team. Dean Barker was there as well, and a huge amount of cup experience, and also you need in the cup great backers: Quantum, Doug DeVos, Hat Foth, Roger Pence. I mean, how exciting was it to be part of this? A brand new team.
It was obviously awesome to be involved in the America's Cup again, and to be involved in such a great team. But the thing that excited me the most was the boats. So I remember the first day we launched the Mule. There was this 38-foot funny looking thing with arms poking out the side and a code 0, and none of us really knew what on earth we were letting ourselves in for. We'd seen some videos of the Ineos guys doing 360s in the air and capsizing in their little test boat, and it was all a little bit daunting. But the learning to sail something new was what excited me the most. The learning curve was incredibly steep. The boats were so different to anything that had ever been before. The catamarans, don't get me wrong, were super cool, but these things are so much more three-dimensional with the way you can adjust the cant, and the sheer power and performance of the monohulls was so far in front of what the catamarans were. It was an awesome time to be learning this new class, and something I feel very, very privileged to have been part of.
Do you remember when they announced the AC-75? I mean, unless you were a naval architect, you couldn't even work out how it was going to float. Could you? Never mind fly. Can you remember, Paul, when you first saw the outline for a fully foiling 75-foot monohull? What were your thoughts then?
I think my thoughts was the same as most of the other guys sat in the room. We had no idea if it would actually work. And I remember the first time going out in the Mule thinking, how is this going to work? And struggling around and finally getting airborne, and then just going, wow, this thing is incredible. And this was on day 2, day 3. We were out in 15, 18 knots, and the thing just kept accelerating. We were like, wow, this is unbelievable. And to add to that, just the technical side again, I was so excited by the two sails. Again, something new, something that had never been done before. The rotating mast, it was just all new, all exciting, and just so many crazy ideas that we worked our way through, and there was never a dull day. It was always exciting.
Give us a little insight into the process, I suppose. You start with something which you're basically trying to tame. How do you refine that? I mean, how did that work within the team?
Again, you have the VPP that comes out with the boat needs to be sailed like this, and you go out in the boat and you're like, there's no way we can do this. And then as time goes by, yeah, okay, that might be more possible, and you get closer to what their predictions actually say, and then you start believing in the tools and you start validating the tools, and it's an amazing process that goes on, and you go in every day from sailing, learning something new and almost something big. We're not just talking small things. You make massive steps every day, and it feels so rewarding to learn to sail these new things and to get better. And I remember the first time you foil in jibe, the first time you foil in tack, it's just exciting times. And also the first time you do some big wipeouts, it's like, whoa, we we need to be careful here. But it's so much fun.
Well, the pandemic hit, didn't there? So there wasn't a great amount of training time in the big boat. But once down in Auckland, American Magic's AC-75 Patriot looked great in the pre-Christmas regatta and out training. I mean, just take us through your role on board, and then what were the other notable crew positions on the boat?
Yeah, we launched the boat. I think we'd had a good couple of months sailing in Defiant, the boat one in Auckland, and going down there for me was just one of the coolest places to sail. I really hope that the cup will be there this time, but unfortunately it doesn't look that way. But New Zealand is such a special place. I remember special times in the laser days leading up to the first Olympic trials I spent down there, and sailing these boats there was something again to hold in high stead. It was a cool time. I remember the first day we launched Patriot, our second boat, and we went out there, and the thing was just unbelievably quick compared to our boat one. It was like, wow, what a step on we've had here. And I remember it all ended up, we got a bit too excited, and I think it was blowing 18, 20 knots by the end, and we came out of a jibe and got a little bit too high and lost the rudder and ended up with a big nosedive, filling the thing up after being told that we were only allowed to take it for a gentle sail on day one. So that it was all exciting very quickly. But the key roles on there, there's obviously the helmsman was Dean Barker. Myself, I was trimming the main and adjusting the jib, and then also there's Andrew Campbell, who was the foil trimmer with Terry as a tactician. We also had a really strong group of grinders that would not only be producing power, but they'd all be making small adjustments on the race course to all sorts of different things. The boats were so complex, it pretty much needed us all to get it around the track in harmony. But it was again an incredible boat to sail, and we felt like we were in good shape before Christmas. I think we'd probably spent the most sailing with our boat one. Boat one probably wasn't the fastest, but it was one of the most reliable, which meant that we could get out there and home, basically get better at sailing the boat, which I think helped us a lot. And then going into Patriot, I remember going into the Christmas Cup, we felt really confident in the breeze against the other guys. We were a little bit unsure about the Kiwis. We'd had glimpse of them, and we knew that they were going to be fast. We hadn't seen the full potential of them in training, because they were obviously launched a lot later than everybody else. So we did got a bit more time in the boats. But going into the Christmas race, we felt pretty good and sailed pretty well. That group was so tight that we could say anything, and then we'd go out and fight again the next day. We thought we had an amazing boat in these conditions, and we were just ready to go. I wasn't going to leave my seat, and Dean turned around and looked at me, and I was like, okay, that was the eye telling me that we were doing this.
What about going into the Cup? What were your thoughts on the other teams in Auckland? I mean, Ben obviously was copping a lot of flack in the build-up, and then Prada looked pretty slick, like they had plenty of potential. But what were your thoughts on your fellow challengers as you got ready for the real thing?
Christmas was really tricky. I remember spending Christmas Day with Giles and a couple of the other guys from the Ineos, and it was hard because you didn't really know what to say. You'd not written them off because you knew they were a great bunch of guys and could turn anything around, but being realistic, you were like, they have a mountain to climb, and to be honest, I personally didn't think they were going to manage to climb it. So it was a little bit awkward. We'd kind of not written them off, but realised that they had a lot of work to do. And then looking at the Italian boat, the size of their foils, the way they sailed in the light winds, it was such that we were really concerned and worried about the Prada boat in under 10 knots. I think in over 10 knots, we were more than happy with the boat's performance, and we were reasonably confident that if we sailed well and we kept developing at a similar rate to all the other teams, we'd be in really good shape going into the Prada Cup.
The setup in Auckland saw your team, American Magic, right next door to Ineos. Not even a real building. It was a giant tent, wasn't it? What did you know about what was going on next door as Ben tried desperately to get his boat up to speed? What did you know about what was happening?
you knew that they were working hard. They were, but I think it was very similar. Like our apartment looked pretty much straight over the top of the Prada building, and you'd go home at night, late at night, and you'd close the curtains to go to bed, and the lights would be on in all 3 or 4 tents. There was work around the clock. You knew everybody was working hard to address problems, but I guess a lot of the issues Ineos were seeing were under the water, so you can see a lot of what they were doing to fix the actuation or how they were controlling the foils, but you knew they were working to try and figure it out. But I think that the bigger worry was the Italians and how they were going to improve their stronger performance to be a stronger team.
How much of a surprise was it then when Ineos came out, charging, winning the Challenger Series?
I don't think anybody expected it. It was completely out of the blue. I think what they did really well is that they sailed the boat really well in what it wasn't boat speed conditions. It was just about minimizing mistakes. It was really tricky sailing with big holes, not much breeze, and they smashed it. They sailed really well, and it's quite frustrating for the other for ourselves and for the Italians. I think one of our biggest issues was the breeze strength. We knew we were vulnerable in under 10 knots due to the foils and the whole package we had relative to the other guys, and the conditions didn't really fall into our hands those first couple of days, and we weren't starting very well. We were struggling a little bit.
How hard is that? I mean, time's passed. You can tell us. I mean, how hard is that in the team? When you're not sailing great.
It's frustrating because we know there's an amazing opportunity there that's slipping past us if we're not careful. But what was really good about the group we're involved with, that everybody backed each other. I think no matter what the results were, we'd come in and we could be very honest in the group about being unhappy with certain bits of each other's performance. And that group was so tight that we could say anything, we could be very open, and then we'd go out and fight again the next day. And I think that was what was, for me, the most special part of working with Terry, Dean, Andrew, James. We had a really special relationship with each other, that it was an open table, and you didn't need to worry about what you said, which was good.
I've been in debriefs before in other classes, obviously not at the Cup, with Terry Hutchinson. And what struck me was he was always the first to put his hand up. And, he was never trying to divert blame anywhere. There was always a culture in the debrief of honesty. Just perhaps, describe that culture that Terry set within the unit.
It was such an open culture, and the underlying goal at the end of every session was, how are we going to get better, and what do we need to support each other better the next day? And I think with that in mind, that's what we finished every debrief with. This is what we need to do, and this is how we're going to do it, and this is how we're going to support each other. I think we had a really tight knit group, and we were all great friends, which helped a lot.
Famously, obviously, American Magic's Challenger Series hit. You knew it was coming. It hit big trouble halfway through, racing Luna Rossa on a windy, a really ominous afternoon. You guys were yet to win a race. What are your initial memories of heading out on that day, on really what was a must-win afternoon?
I think excitement. We finally got out to the race course. We no longer had to be worrying about getting on the foils or dropping off the foils. We needed to be worried about basically holding on and pushing the boat as hard as we could. And I remember we got out into the channel, and the first issue was basically pulling the sails up, because all of a sudden we weren't comfortable on side tow because the boat was bouncing around, and we were worried about damaging the foils. So we ended up on a bow tow, which made the transfers a little bit awkward and a little bit not quite how everything normally was. But once we'd got the sails up, and once we'd got to go around the course, it was exhilarating. These boats are awesome, and we'd finally got this 20 knots and waves, and it was full on, and it was super exciting, and we were very confident because we thought we had an amazing boat in these conditions, and we were just ready to go. And I'm not sure if it was postponed or delayed, but we were just itching and chomping at the bit to get involved and get going.
Well, the race did get going, and you were leading that race, but it was breezy, wasn't it? Gusty coming off the land. I mean, how much can you remember of heading into that capsize?
I can remember it all. I quite often replay it back through and think if we could have said something different or basically gone about it differently to come out with a different outcome. But it was what it was, and we all had our roles on board, and we all stuck to those roles, and it didn't quite go away. And I remember clearly with about 30 seconds coming into the mark how dark and black the sky was, and how the water was getting rougher, and looking at the speedo, and we're doing 42 knots at wind, and it was just like, whoa, this is pretty full on. This is going to be exciting. But it was frustrating. It kind of felt like we'd given away a race that was a definite win, and the initial thoughts was really disappointment. But as soon as we were, I guess everybody was in the water, it was more of a, wow, we need to be concerned about everybody. And once everybody was all right and the boat was upright, it kind of felt like, okay, let's just look at the next day, let's get on with it. But then all of a sudden the problems escalated quite quickly when the boat started disappearing under the water. And again, it just turned into a new challenge. And looking back, it was a very special group of people doing some very special, amazing things to stop the boat sinking. And I remember looking over, and there's the owner, there's Doug DeVos sat on the chase handing pumps. There's people from other teams jumping in the water with knives in their teeth and tying things to the boat. And it was hectic, it was frantic, but it was really cool to be involved with, and really awesome to see not only our team but the other teams helping and working through the situation to get the boat to float and to save the boat.
How close was Patriot to sinking?
I think it was pretty close. I think at one point where everything was underwater and the chase boat was getting pulled under a little bit, the guys were like, okay, it's time to leave. But we kind of got enough marks tied onto everywhere. But the biggest worry was that the hole we were trying to plug was now underwater, so the pumps weren't really going to empty the ocean for us, and that was the biggest worry. But I remember on the tow in that evening, it took. I don't think we got back to the dock till around midnight, and the initial thoughts and frustrations soon changed. I remember sitting on the back with Dean, chatting through it, sitting with Coach, chatting through it, and just talking. This is not over. We still have an opportunity here. We have to get back out there and show everybody what we can do and get back into it. And it was a long evening, but a nice evening. I remember motoring in really slowly backwards with the sun setting and surrounded by a bunch of other guys. I remember Dick was on the helm from Team New Zealand, and we were joking, "What on earth are you doing on here? Come on, out of the way." But it was cool that we'd saved the boat and got it home. And I remember after getting ashore, we finally got the boat in the shed, and Doug, as he always does, gives an incredible speech that just motivates everybody and gets everybody focused on the job in hand. And we were so lucky to have supporters and backers of that sort of stature to draw the team together and get the best out of everybody.
What did he say?
He basically just talked his way through the day and how inspired he was by all of us and by what an amazing team we have, what amazing people we have, and that this is not the end of the journey. And it's, I'm the least to high five like Americans are renowned for, but it kind of did almost feel a little bit like that. It was so motivational, and everybody just wanted to get straight into it and get working on trying to get the boat back together.
Do you think the capsize was avoidable? There was a lot of chat, Goody, wasn't there, afterwards, and what you'd meant on the comms, whether you were in agreement with a bear-away jibe or not. I mean, the whole thing was dissected to death, and I guess I was part of that as well. But, looking back, could the situation have been avoided?
I think at the time I was pretty strong and wanted to do a different option. And I kind of still stand by that now. If we were put in that situation again, I would have tried to do what I'd asked for. But at the end of the day, it falls on the skipper. And the way the chain of command works on our boat was that Dean has the call, and whatever that call is, you work to do that the best you can. And I remember clearly at one point I wasn't going to leave my seat because I didn't want to do that option. And Dean turned around and looked at me, and I was like, okay, that was the eye telling me that we were doing this, and we can't tack until I run across and get in the other side. So at that point we were committed, and that's what we were doing. And again, we tried the best we could to get the boat round the turn, but we were just unfortunate that we capsized, and a little bit the way the boat works, the normal presets that the grinders use for easing the runners are such that it only uses it a certain amount, so they don't have to pump it back on. And in that situation, it needed more than your standard ease, and that was not what the boat was programmed to do, unfortunately.
You flew past the actual capsize, but I just want to take you, back to that. I mean, watching it from the outside, the boat flew up in the air and then crashed into the ocean, and you were on it. Describe what that was like. I mean, were you scared?
To be honest, it wasn't actually that scary. We'd had much bigger crashes in the practicing, and especially in the little boat. It was almost quite tame. It was just at a certain point you knew what was coming ahead, and it was just like, oh no, knowing that the opportunity was slipping away for the race win. And it kind of all happened a little bit in slow motion, but not through being scary. It was just more the realization that we weren't going to win that race, and that was the frustrating part rather than the scary part.
How much real belief was there that you would be back in fighting action?
I think everybody believed that we could be back out there. It was the first time in the Challenger Series we'd had the conditions that the boat performed in, and we look back at the performance of the boat in that race, and we had a good jump on the other guys, and we were just, if we get the boat back out in a similar state to what it left the race in, we're going to be in with a great shot here of taking it to them. But I guess what we hadn't account, or what you couldn't account for, is the gains that the other guys are going to make in those 2 weeks, and that was a frustrating bit. We spoke about earlier the massive leap in performance the last 2 or 3 months, and every day the boats are getting faster. And I think we had 2 days of sailing before we raced, and in those 2 days of sailing, we were just literally trying to get the boat to work, trying to get things to operate as they should, trying to tune the valves and the cylinders to work as they did before, and we weren't increasing the performance of the boat. Whether the boat was as fast as it was before the capsize, it's hard to say, but it wasn't faster. And unfortunately, the Italian boat had got significantly faster in those couple of weeks.
Was the writing on the wall from then on, do you think?
I think the biggest disappointment from all of us was the first day of racing was windy, and we got out there early. Nobody else was putting their mainsails up. Everybody was a bit edgy, and I couldn't wait to get into it. Okay, let's go, boys. Let's get the sail up. Let's get a couple of laps in, and we did a couple of laps. They were a little bit loose. I remember doing, I think, the couple of bearaways before we even started, we were well over 50 knots, and the boat was on edge, but it was controllable, and we were sailing the thing pretty good before the start. The problem was we didn't start that well again, and it felt like we were not really attacking the race. We were just sailing around, and that was the frustrating part, that we weren't attacking it as hard as we should have been.
How tough was it exiting that cup, Paul? I mean, you came in as a new team, but with a lot of promise, as we've talked about. How disappointing was that exit?
Massively disappointing. I think you go back to pre-Christmas, and there was a massive belief in the team that we could be in a real good position to have a good go at the Kiwis and to try and win the cup. And you forward the clock 6 weeks, and all of a sudden you're the bottom of the pile. And it was super upsetting that we hadn't had the opportunity to show how good the team was. And that's something that really feels like unfinished business. We had some amazing talent in that team, from designers to engineers, sailors, support staff. Everybody in that team worked so hard for 3 years, and we came away short. And it's frustrating, and it hits hard. You come in after that last race, and the boat didn't work, which was the biggest frustration. It would have been nice to have sailed around the race and been beaten fair and square, but for the boat to fail was almost like the final dagger. It was hard to stomach and upsetting.
How hard did Terry and Dean find it? You know, for different reasons, it must have been hard for both of them.
I think it was incredibly hard for both of them. I think it was incredibly hard for all the team. You see how passionate Terry is, and how he wears his emotions on the outside, and he'd been the reason why the team was there, and it was I think it was devastating for him, and for Dean also, that we'd finished the way that we'd finished.
Well, so very quickly, that was that, your Cup campaign over. It seemed as soon as the Cup team exited in Auckland, the entire entourage headed to Alan's Mad Loop Wingfoil Centre on the lake there in Auckland. Paul Goodison included. We saw you down there a few times. Tell us, a year on, how's the wingfoil career going?
I think I probably did more wingfoil in the 2 weeks I was in Auckland than I've done since then. It's been frustrating. My my brother-in-law here came to the lake on, I think it was New Year's Day, and he got me out winging in 2 degrees C, and I haven't done as much as I maybe would like to, but as soon as the weather gets warmer, I'll be back into it. But that was a fantastic way to unwind and set your mind onto something new after the Cup, and also a great way to hang out with your teammates and guys from the other team and just have fun on the water together. It was I really enjoyed that.
It was good. It felt like a real place for a reset for everyone involved in the Cup. Paul, we're talking to you from your home in northern Italy. I mean, what's next for Paul Goodison? What are you up to now?
I've just re-signed for the American Magic, and super excited to be going again and part of this team. And like we spoke about, it feels like unfinished business. I feel like this team is really special to me, from the relationships we've had and also the journey that we went through. We saw highs together, we saw lows together, and made some special bonds, not only with other team members, but also the families, the kids. And I'm really excited to be going back to American Magic and to hopefully doing a much better job this time around.
Well, of course, there's been rumours, Paul, but nothing official. I'm wondering if you're actually allowed to say that. We've got the scoop here on Shirley Robertson's Sailing Podcast.
I don't think I can say too much at the moment. It's obviously an incredible opportunity for me, and something that I really can't wait to get my teeth into after sailing those cool boats, which was almost a year ago. Now it's time to get back out in them, and the second generation look just as awesome, and I can't wait to be allowed to go out sailing again.
Oh, we can't wait to see it. I mean, congratulations. That's great news. I mean, Paul, you've come a long way from that sailing club in Rotherham. It's not all been easy, as we've heard, but it's been a journey, hasn't it? I mean, what do you think when you look back on the career you've had? Multiple world titles in different classes, America's Cups, Olympic campaigns, a gold medal. What do you think when you look back at that career?
You look back and hopefully it's only just started. I still see some amazing and exciting times ahead of me, but looking back, the things that stand out for me the most are the people I've met, the friends I've made, and the experiences I've had together. So not only the highs but the lows. It kind of shapes you as a human, and you learn so much from this. And I guess without it, I wouldn't have met my wife. I wouldn't have my little boy and my family. And I feel very privileged to be doing what I'm doing right now, and looking forward to sailing these second generation AC75s. It's really exciting times.
Paul Goodison, thank you so much. It's been fascinating. Thank you.
Thanks, Shirley.
Paul Goodison, ladies and gentlemen, a lifelong pro and surely a man with an incredibly exciting America's Cup ahead of him. We're all looking forward to that. We worked very closely with all the teams at AC36 in Auckland, and I can clearly see why Terry Hutchinson's American Magic means so much to Goody. They were a great team to work with. As things get going for their next challenge, we wish them all the very best. A massive thank you to Goody for his time, for sitting down to record the podcast. Goody, many, many thanks. And we love to hear from you, our listeners. So let me know what you think about the pod. Like, review and subscribe on whatever platform you're joining us on. And if you're enjoying the podcast chats, why not show your support by heading over to buymeacoffee.com/sailing podcast. It's easy to do, and it helps keep us free of any advertising. To Tim at Vertigo Films, as ever, thank you for all your hard work making the podcast happen. Tim, many, many thanks. Until next time, thank you so much for listening. Have fun on the water and sail safe, everyone.
This is Castle 1. Race officer speaking.
Lane line is on boundary up ahead, 35 seconds out.
A bit lower and faster here.
Ho, ho, ho. That's a good one, Jimmy.
Still gaining on the lane line there. Gaining on the lane line
We're looking
there.
at 10-5, 42. Matching him on the boundary, yeah, copy.
This is Castle 1 standing by. Out.